I wanted to just throw out some of the commonly given talking points just in the culture. These aren't meant to be the leading philosophical pro-choice arguments, but the ones that people say on Twitter and on Facebook and on political ads and on billboards and signs, and just to see how you would refute those, in part for people who are listening, to hopefully equip them. Because as you've already mentioned, that this is a winnable debate, and we have a lot on our side. We're the side that is pro-life, pro people living and being born and having the opportunity to live their lives. And that's the right side of this. So I'd just be curious on some of your responses. My body, my choice.
Well, okay, I think that women do have a right to their body, but what you don't have a right to do is harm someone else with your body. So you can say that the fetus inside a woman is part of her body. You're being scientifically inaccurate. It's very clear. Embryology, the study of the beginning of life, makes it clear. When sperm and egg fuse, we have a distinct, living, whole human. We all agree the sperm is part of the dad, the ovum is part of the mother. When they unite, something new comes into being, a distinct human being. I don't think anyone says that the fetus is part of the dad. We know his sperm was involved, but it's not part of him. In the same way, the egg is no longer in existence. A new being exists, a distinct, living, whole human. So yeah, 100%. The mom has a right to her body, but we're not talking about her body. In the same way, a mother should not drown her toddler in her bathtub with her hands, using her body to harm someone else. The mother should not ask someone else to kill this other being inside of her body. Your body, your choice, yes, but not your body, not your choice.
No uterus, no opinion.
Oh, I love this one, because what I like to say is, okay, if that's true, what do we do with Roe v. Wade? This law was decided by 9 men in robes. People always say, well, it's okay, those men can talk because they're pro-choice. And I say, oh, so pro-choice men can have an opinion. It's just pro-life men who can't have an opinion. And they say, oh, yeah, that's fair. Well, that's just nonsense. Secondly, this is really interesting today. As we culturally move away from traditional understandings of men and women, you can no longer say that you have to have a uterus to be a woman. Now, whether or not I agree with that's a separate issue, but today it is no longer viewed that way. So having a uterus does not make you a woman anymore. This issue has changed for them. And so I often ask, well, what does it mean to be a woman? And who really has a right to make these decisions? But it boils down to this. Here's our core argument. Arguments don't have genders, people have genders. Whether you have a uterus or don't have a uterus, the argument you're making is objective outside one. This should be judged on its merit. I was once at a campus and someone said, you don't have a uterus, sit down. And I said, okay, I'll let my colleague talk, Jamie, a woman. They said, oh, you're a Christian, you sit down. They just want any reason they can to ignore your argument. They must respond to an argument, not just attack us as people. That's an ad hominem fallacy.
It's also the only argument where we make that case. Like if you watch a football game and you don't like a call, and it says, well, you never played in the NFL, so you can have it. Or if you read a book, I didn't really like this book. Well, you've never published a book, so you can't have an opinion on books. Again, that's to me a very illogical argument. I've heard the argument that a newly, an ovum that's just been conceived is not a person.
I'm sorry, ovum was what?
I said I've heard the argument that when the baby is recently conceived, it's not a person yet; it's just cells.
Oh yeah, so that's so interesting, and this I think we wouldn't have time in a lightning round necessarily, but I do think it's interesting for listeners to think back to patterns of dehumanization. This is not new. We've often looked at humans in the way or have something we want and said, well, you're not a person. Native Americans, women, Black people, Jews, we have often looked at them and said, you're not a person because you're different in some way. And so I think we have to give it a historical context. But here's my quick response. When people say this, I say, what do you mean not a person? And they'll say, well, the embryo may be human, but she's different from us. And I say, well, how is she different? And they give you generally 4 differences between us and embryos. They say they're smaller than us, thus they're not persons. They're not as developed as we are. They, for example, can't dream dreams or have rational thought. They're in a different environment inside the mother, or they're dependent on the mother. These 4 differences are the 4 categories they always give you: size, level of development, environment, or dependency. They say one of these differences makes that human not a person like us. And I say, well, those differences are real differences. But look at you compared to a newborn. How are you different from a newborn? Size, you're larger. level development. That newborn can't read books like you can or go to school. Environment, that newborn stays home, whereas you go to work every day. Pre-COVID anyway, we all went to work in an office somewhere. And dependency, you are a lot less dependent on your parents than a newborn is. Is that newborn less of a person? Well, no, of course not, because those differences are irrelevant when it comes to our personhood, our value. And in the same way, the preborn human, those differences are real, but they don't make her any less of a person. All they really mean is she's younger. As she gets older, she'll grow in size, level development, and so on. So this argument is arbitrary and basically at its core prejudice.
Might have a similar response, but I was also going to bring up, sometimes people bring up viability. I feel like this is especially true among people who are not maybe pro late term abortion, but do see abortion being legitimate before, let's say, 20 weeks when with the heartbeat. How would you respond to that? That until the fetus is viable, could live outside the mother, it can be justifiably aborted?
I think the first question to ask is, why does this matter? And I think that there is some intuitiveness to there, I think, to the argument that when you can survive on your own, you matter in a different way. But I think when you ask them, why does that matter? And also ask them, in what way is a newborn really viable? I mean, a newborn certainly can survive outside the womb, but a newborn needs someone to feed her, to protect her, to take care of her in a different way from a teenager who requires less care, but still some care, but less care than a newborn. The younger you are, merely the more care and protection you need. So why does it matter to be able to survive on your own? And what does that really mean? And in what way can a newborn genuinely survive on her own? But if they'll often say, well, all I mean is she can be in an incubator or something, and so the mom isn't really needed in the same way that she is when the baby's inside of her, and that makes it different. I'll just say, well, understand this. Viability reflects our technology. There's nothing changing in the baby to make her viable. Viability, as we understand, is a reflection of how good we are today with our technology to support babies outside the womb. Because of that, in first world countries like America, viability is somewhere between 22 to 24 weeks. In developing countries, it's later in the 30s. So are you saying that babies here in America become persons before babies in third world countries? That seems terribly ethnocentric. And I think that when you put it back to them that way, they realize that we are, again, talking about technology. What we really have to ask is, when is the being herself valuable, not what technological supports are there for her? And we all recognize today that we don't have the technology we need for certain sicknesses. For COVID-19, for example, we haven't perfected our solution for that. That doesn't mean those who are sick with COVID-19 aren't valuable. The technology today may give us certain abilities and capabilities, but it doesn't change the value of the people who need that technology.
I appreciate that. Absolutely, I agree with you on 100%. I've heard the argument that either a family might not be a particular family might not be the most stable environment for a child to live in, or the child might have some sort of birth defect that's going to affect its quality of life. And in some ways, it would be more humane to just abort the baby.
Yeah. Who are you to decide, right? I mean, they say this, right? Like, it's better for the baby to be killed than to grow up in a world like this. Who are you to decide that? Why have you been given the powers of life and death to control who has a quality of life worthy of life and who doesn't? And are you measuring quality of life compared to your life? That seems terribly, again, prejudice. It's like someone saying you have to have skin like my color of skin to be valuable. That's prejudice, and that is wrong. It is not humane to decapitate, dismember, and disembowel someone. What we need to do is find real solutions that don't involve killing. Our solutions aren't perfect. Foster care, adoption, we need reform, no doubt. But that does not mean killing is a solution.
It's also another argument that I feel like, based on time, becomes very arbitrary. Because what if you have a 2-year-old and their primary caregiver, or both parents even, die tragically, and they might have a really tough road ahead of them? As nobody would say, well, Peter Singer might, but no rational person would say, well, this 2-year-old, they're going to have such a difficult life ahead of themselves, we should just advocate for infanticide. But if the baby's not born, that seems to be on the table.
You're right. And that's, at the end of the day, all we're asking for is equality. Treat preborn humans the same way you treat born humans. If you wouldn't kill a born child for this reason, Don't kill a preborn child. They're just younger. They're the same human being. You're exactly right.
Last argument that's very popular in the culture: cases of rape, incest, and the health of the mother as justifications for abortion.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's important is I like to ask people, first of all, I'll say, what if for the sake of argument, I would be okay with abortion and rape, incest, and the life of the mother? According to Guttmacher Institute, Alan Guttmacher was the president of Planned Parenthood. This is an organization that does not cook the books for our side. It's a leftist liberal side. According to their research, these abortions account for less than 1% of all abortions. So I'll say, what if for the sake of argument, I was okay with abortion for these three reasons? Would you agree with me that the 99% of abortions, those are wrong? And they almost say, well, no, absolutely not. And I say, okay, well then let's talk about the majority of abortions. Once we agree there, then we'll come to these special cases. Because what they're doing is they're using this as an emotional, trump card to try to shut the argument down. They don't really believe this is the only cases abortion should be allowed in. But sometimes they'll say, yeah, all other abortions are wrong, just these three cases. So here's how I respond. When it comes to rape, we must recognize that we are against violence. That's why we're against abortion. And so rape is a great violent act on a woman, and the punishment should be paid to the person who did that. But does it make sense when you have three humans involved to punish the victimizer, the father, to help the mother, and then punish the other party, the child? Does that make sense? I would argue that the child is a secondary victim of the assault. The mother is the primary victim, but the child, by definition, is being brought into a world where her father, at best case scenario, is in jail, prosecuted. That's going to be a difficult life growing up with that. She's a secondary victim of what happened. We don't punish victims, we punish victimizers. And furthermore, you certainly don't put the victimizer in jail and punish the baby with capital punishment. That seems horribly unjust. So what we should do is help the mother, help the child. The mom, maybe it would be best for her not to be the custodial mother, to choose adoption of some kind. That's a choice she can pursue. But the violence of rape does not justify the violence of abortion. When it comes to life, that's the rape. That's really important to clarify the point there. On life of the mother, I think it boils down to this. We have a couple of choices. If the mother's life is truly in jeopardy, so not just she's facing bed rest, but she could die from this pregnancy, we could do nothing and stand by and let two humans die. That's not good. We could save someone. We should do that. What we can't do is save both of them. That's just impossible right now technologically. So I argue we should do the greatest moral good possible. So we save someone. The question is, who can you save? Before viability, you cannot save the baby because, again, we lack technology to keep that baby alive. But you can save the mother. So just like a nurse in triage has to decide, who do I help? You help the patient who is most likely to respond to the medication you have to offer that patient. When you have two patients you're looking at to help, you help the one that is most likely to respond. In the same way, we save the mother because she's the only one we can save. If we could save both, we would do that. We do save the mother because saving one is better than saving neither one.
I absolutely agree. I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Seth. I appreciate your time.